Make sure that's working okay. Okay, I think we're getting live over here. Let's see. All right, we are live, and welcome everybody to today's Friends of Curry's Fork get together. Today is just a little bit different because I wanted to take the chance at the end of the year to go over. I think we're getting live over here. Stop the extra feedback there. I want to take the chance at the end of 2021 to talk about what we've done this year and talk about plans for next year, because there's so many moving pieces all the time with this work. And if you're just kind of jumping in, or for a lot of people that have kind of dipped their toes in this with me a little bit, I completely understand how overwhelming it can be and confusing. So hopefully today we'll just clarify kind of in one time and place what we've been working on and why we're doing it. And especially to encourage people to jump in with us and know that we really would love to see more participation, especially from the public, and we cannot do this work without public support and participation. Okay. So thank you so much for those that are on the Zoom. Thank you if you're watching this live on Facebook, and thank you if you are watching this later. Again, the purpose of this session is to provide a summary that all that we accomplished in 2021 and celebrate, especially those of you that have made it a great year. Also want to touch on a little bit of what we've got planned for 2022. So this Curry's Fork Watershed program, it's really a team effort between Oldham County Fiscal Court, that's our county government, the Kentucky Division of Water, so that's our state level, several local organizations and agencies, and then of course you, the public. I'm going to try to leave a little bit of time to answer any questions that come up during this session. But if you have a question, or you're watching this later and you have a question, just please follow up with me and I'll provide my contact information, but I definitely want to hear from you. Okay, so just putting a little bit of some logos face to what I'm talking about here. I'm sure I missed some people and organizations in here, but I just really want to emphasize how comprehensive this work is, how many players we have in doing this work, and how important it is to get all of the stakeholders together, people both locally and at the state level, to try to make some headway in helping to improve the quality of our streams. So thank you. And then I'm Becca Truman, the Watershed Coordinator. So I work for Oldham County Fiscal Court out of the engineer's office. So here is my contact information here. So feel free again to please reach out to me. In terms of social media, if just making sure that people are aware, where can you find out information? How can you learn more? So primarily through Facebook, it's a great way to stay up to date on our Facebook page. We also have a group, Friends of Curry's Fork, that I encourage anybody to join. That's where we can talk a little bit more in smaller groups and ask questions and get a little bit more intimate with what we're working on. The QR code right here is for that Friends of Curry's Fork group. And then somewhat recently, I started a YouTube page with doing a lot more Zooms and a lot more recordings. I just wanted that to be available. So if you go to our YouTube page, it's just Curry's Fork Watershed on YouTube. You'll find workshop recordings, how-tos, and just little kind of tidbits there that you might find interesting. In terms of other ways to stay informed, I have an email list. So if Facebook is not your thing, totally get it. Just let me know and I'll add you to our email list. I try to limit contact to about 1 to 2 times a month, just depends on what's going on, but that's a great way to stay up to date as well. We have Meetup groups, which I'll talk about in a minute. Then there's the Oldham County What's Happening. That's a free newsletter that comes out twice a year. So we try to have an article in that to just give you a little bit more a heads up on what we've got going on and try to promote some specific initiatives we have. And then we have our Curry's Fork stakeholder meeting, which I'm trying to be better about making sure the public is aware of those meetings, and we're aiming to have those meetings 2 to 3 times a year. Okay, so in terms of getting involved, and I'll talk more specifics again about this later. So we have these public meetup groups, and just providing opportunities for you, for the public to get together is so essential with this work. So in 2020, we started the Friends of Curry's Fork. So this is our local watershed group. You might have heard of like Friends of Beargrass Creek, or there's a Floyd's Fork watershed group. So this is our watershed group for people who work, live, and play in the Curry's Fork watershed. And we typically meet on the 3rd Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. So that's the time now. We try to have different site visits, get outside, talk about things, and kind of work together to help spearhead some different priorities that we're working on. Our Pollinator Garden group, so this group started this past summer. We've been meeting on the 2nd Wednesday of the month, usually in the afternoon, depending on when the sun sets now. But this is the group that we're really focused on pollinator gardens. So we have a garden at the Lagrange Welcome Center, and that's sort of our home base at the moment. But I'm trying to encourage people who might be interested in pollinators to get together, provide a space to learn, to interact with the plants in the dirt, and then get some seeds. And hopefully in the future, that'll really increase, and I'd love to be able to provide not just seeds for people, but plants themselves, and just really make this a huge county-wide initiative. So in terms of volunteer opportunities, there are several that we try to have throughout the year. We have tree plantings, again, work with the pollinator gardens, tabling at events. So I'll go to Oldham County Day, and then potentially other events that community groups might have. We can set up a table. I wanted to mention the Leaders Don't Litter group. So that is a county-wide organization that gets volunteers to help pick up litter along our roadsides and streams. And there's always an opportunity, if you're not somebody that necessarily wants to go outside and plant a tree, to just help spread awareness. So trying to provide resources and information. So if you've got any topics that you'd love to know more about, or you'd love to share with others, again, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to get you whatever you need that will be helpful. In terms of program opportunities, so focusing on education, we've got our public meetups, a lot of workshops, both, of course, online and then in person to the extent that we can. I can provide at-home site visits. So if you have any questions, maybe you're trying to build a pollinator garden, maybe you've got a stream that's eroding, reach out and I can come check that out with you and try to help you out. And again, just adding in that I'm just trying to be a resource for you in any way that I can. For funding, we have our septic system program. We have rain barrels, streamside plantings, native seeds, and rain gardens. I'm going to get more into these specifically, but I wanted to give kind of the first overview here. And we are looking for a business who wants to plant a rain garden. So if you have any ideas, or maybe you're a business owner and that seems like something that might be a fit for you, just reach out to me because we do have a little funding for that. Okay, I'm going to step back and do a quick introduction to the Curry's Fork Watershed Program. Again, if you're looking for more detailed information, just ask me. I'm trying to provide just the right amount of information today. And again, we've got our YouTube page where you can look at recordings of other workshops and things that have happened. So a watershed, we have our Curry's Fork Watershed Program. And if you don't really remember what a watershed is, or maybe you haven't heard that word since you were in 5th grade, which is totally possible. Just a reminder that a watershed is an area of land where all of the water that falls on that piece of land is channeled to the same rivers and streams and lakes. And it's a way to understand when we have problems with our streams, when we're finding high bacteria in our streams, or we're finding, say, algae blooms, we can turn around and look and say, well, what's contributing to this? And it's the land around those streams, which is how we define our watersheds. So for this work, we have our Curry's Fork watershed, which is completely within Oldham County. And Curry's Fork has 4 sub-watersheds. So watersheds are always defined at different scales. And we go at the sub-watershed scale for this work because we're trying to target our water quality improvements at the best level that we can. So that's when, if you hear about North Fork, Curry's Fork, or South Fork, or Asher's Run, that's where those terms come in. We're still in the Curry's Fork watershed, but we're looking at a finer scale. And then just to give a context of a bigger scale, beyond the Curry's Fork watershed, the Curry's Fork watershed is in the Salt River watershed, which is one of 7 large watershed basins in Kentucky. That water goes to the Ohio River, which is the Ohio River watershed, and that goes to the Mississippi River. So we have our Mississippi River Basin watershed. Basin and watershed are somewhat interchangeable, but basins are just that bigger scale. And then all that water goes to the Gulf Coast. So if you hear about the dead zone, eutrophication, where there's a lot of nutrients headed that way, and that leads to all this excess algae growth, and then all that algae dies and uses all the oxygen, and now nothing can live there. Well, we are part of that. We contribute to that. So just remember where that water flows and how we are connected. Okay. So one thing I'm trying to be better about conveying to people is that when we have issues with streams, we still kind of have in our minds, well, the idea of like streams being on fire, like they were in California and Chicago, and Ohio back in the 70s, or oil spills, or really obvious signs that something's wrong with our streams. But the reality is that streams that are not meeting water quality standards, streams that are a risk to human health, they don't really look like they have severe issues. So this is a really good example of this. So in 2020, the Oldham County Stormwater Department, they went and monitored all the streams in the Curry's Fork watershed. And these are pictures of streams that on this day, these samples were taken, and all the streams had E. coli. So this is our bacteria, which might be a risk to human health. All the streams had levels that were above the testing maximum. They had really high levels of bacteria, which is not good. So one really common theme we see in all these pictures is that the streams are brown. And on this day, there was a really high flow event. It had recently rained. And so what that tells us is that after it rained, all that water ran across the land in the watershed, ended up in these streams. And as that water runs across the land, it picks up anything it can put back into that solution with the water. So we have a lot of nutrients. So that could be from people putting fertilizers on their lawn. It could be from animal waste. We have oils and road salts, and that all kind of comes together and gets dumped in the streams. And that's really important to think about when we have a lot of hard surfaces, so like driveways and rooftops and parking lots, where there's no infiltration that's happening in that land. So when the water hits that, it's just getting channeled straight to the streams. So you may not see a stream very often, but when you think about the fact that our streams may not be healthy and they may be a risk to human health, I just want to remind people that our streams, what streams look like and what we expect streams to look like is not always the same. Okay. So thinking about, I talked a little bit about streams in Oldham County. So thinking about streams in Kentucky, so the reality is that most of the counties in Kentucky, if not all of them, have streams that we consider to be a risk to human health. Their bacteria levels are too high. And of all the streams that Division of Water tests, as of 2016, almost 80% of those streams are considered impaired, just like the streams in the Curry's Fork watershed. So this is not an isolated issue. This is a state issue. This is a countrywide issue. But being that this is something that occurs throughout our state and country, the watershed programs like this program are actually very unique. So I just wanted to put a picture up so you could see the previous slide again, all these streams, all these counties that have red streams, those are the streams of highest concern. But now all of these points on this map are the watersheds that have a program kind of like this one. So I would love to see every county have a program like this. And I think it's really special that Oldham has this program and they've continued to maintain this program for several years. Okay. So now I just want to mention how we determine priority. So we've got these problems in the stream. How do we figure out what actions to take to help address those problems? So that comes from a few sources. One, let's do a quick overview here. Okay, so in 2021, one of our main priorities was our septic system our septic system cost share program. So this is a program where septic systems in general in the watershed and in Oldham County are a huge contributor to water quality, to high bacteria in our streams, because failing septic systems are sending effluent straight to our streams. So that's something that we want to reduce through this program. So it's a cost share program. So this year we provided it as a 50-50 cost share where our grant funds provide up to $7,000 and the homeowner pays the remaining balance. We've had $142,000 total in federal funding between the two grants that we have right now. And what we did this year, in a previous grant, we targeted specifically the Upper Ashers Run watershed in here, because that's our highest priority area according to the watershed plan of where septic systems are having the biggest impact. But for this year, what we did was we opened it up to anybody in the watershed, and we've had almost all of the funds either allocated or spent at this point. So we're in the process of leading to fixing or replacing 21 septic systems. We have a little bit of funding left, so we have about $1,000 left. So if we have one more person that has an issue, we want to get that money spent, and then we might look into getting more money in the future. But for now, this is the amount that we have. Because we've been really working towards expanding pollinator habitat focused on the importance of native plants for supporting our wildlife, I wanted to combine those two initiatives of the septic system, of the pollinator habitat with this. So for those of the 21 participants who have been interested, I've started to work with people to plant pollinator habitat on the septic system sites, because it's really the ideal situation where somebody comes in and they kind of pre-prep the site for you. They dig up a site and the contractor is gonna reseed and straw that. But if we can take that site and put down some native seed, all the better. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of these next year. So for stream restoration, stream buffers, this has been a huge initiative, and this is going to be even bigger going into the next couple of years. Our streams, one of the biggest issues with our streams is they're just severely eroding. And one of the best ways we can address that is by getting good roots in the ground along our stream banks. We want to keep our stream banks intact as much as we can. We want to protect the land for wildlife, and we want to protect the land for property. So the cheapest way and most economical, low risk way we can do that is simply by planting trees. Trees are a great option to address many of the issues that we're dealing with in our lands and our communities right now. So we're trying to get more trees in the ground essentially. And to do this, we've had a couple of neighborhood plantings. So one of my kind of long-term visions is if we can work with specific neighborhoods who have streams in their subdivisions and in their areas, we can teach a few people how to plant these trees. And then if they've got neighbors that have issues, now we have a really close access to people who know how to plant trees, and then they can help their neighbors and so on and so forth. And especially with trying to be safe during the pandemic, this has been a way to sort of help keep people in smaller groups as well. So we're planting both just bare root seedlings as well as live stakes. And live stakes are essentially branches that you cut from a tree, and not all trees will do this, but willows and dogwoods are a great example. And you put the stick in the ground and it grows into a new tree. And that's ideal for along stream banks, because when we plant along stream banks, we want to have the minimal impact, minimize our impact. So if you put a shovel in the ground to plant a tree, that's going to disturb the bank more than sticking one of these, planting one of these sticks in your bank. So if you haven't engaged with these plantings, I would highly encourage you to get involved. And if you have an area that you have in mind for this, please let me know. I'm also trying to work with people who want to learn how to harvest live stakes. So teach people how to essentially where to find trees, cut branches, and that way it just makes it a little bit easier to get more of these trees out there and in the ground. And this map here, we had a giveaway as well. So again, we're really trying to hit this at all angles. So this map is locations in Curry's Fork where people planted trees this past year that I know of. And just wanted to take a second to give some pictures here. So this is something that all ages can take part in. It's really fun and really easy, and the risk to planting these trees and having them not grow is pretty minimal. But so far we've had great success, and most of the trees we planted have been doing great. Okay, rain barrels. So rain barrels is one way that we can help people start to engage with reducing stormwater runoff on their own property. They're also amazing if you have a garden, because it's a free source of water, and the water quality of rain is going to make your plants happier than city water. So something to keep in mind there too. So we have this 50-50 cost share where people can buy a rain barrel, install it on their properties, and submit for reimbursement of 50% up to $50. And luckily, we've been able to open this up to all Oldham County residents, because Oldham Stormwater has also contributed some money to this as well. So just in Curry's Fork, we've had 10 homeowners take part in this, but we're hoping to kick back up in 2022 as well. Right. Earlier on, I talked quite a bit about our Friends of Curry's Fork, this local watershed group. So again, just trying to provide opportunities to get together for discussion, for topics that people want to learn about, getting outside, which is really one of the best things, is just let's get outside, go on a walk, get out, get some fresh air, walk trails, see the streams. Trying to go to different places in the county. So we've been to Wilborn Park. We've worked quite a bit with Udall. They're a great group. So earlier this fall, we went on a tour of Udall, and that was really fun. We planted a rain garden there last year, and they've got, you see this picture here. So they've got a green roof. If you haven't seen that, I encourage you to check it out. And then we've also been to the Lagrange library and are looking at a pollinator garden there. So talking more about our pollinator gardens and our pollinator garden group. Again, this is a volunteer group. So the idea is to have volunteers help to both plant, maintain, and promote pollinator gardens. The more people that can know about pollinator gardens and know their benefits and how easy it is to plant one and maintain one, really the better we'll all be. And it's so exciting to have a garden that, every week, even every day, you go out and look at it, something's different. And that's exciting for both, me as an adult and for kids who get to see this too. So this right here, we have a garden at the Lagrange Welcome Center, and that's been our primary place right now. So this year we were able to get some seeds from there, as well as Udall and some other places around. And we held a seed swap at the Lagrange Farmers Market. And that was just a really heartwarming event for people to come out, and people who came specifically for the seed swap, and then people who we got to talk to and give seeds to. And it happened to be the Halloween weekend. So we had people just, the kids coming up with their bags, and we were giving them seeds, and that was really cool. So I'm hoping we'll be able to probably be able to do a seed swap maybe in the spring and definitely next fall as well. Okay, I mentioned rain gardens. So this is something that really happened in 2020, but it's a work in progress like every garden. So we worked with Udall to plant a rain garden. And I just wanted to make sure to provide pictures because rain gardens, which is planted and will look very similar to a pollinator garden, because that's the idea, to provide plants for wildlife, but a rain garden is specifically meant to take in stormwater and provide a place for that water to infiltrate into the ground. So similar to rain barrels, just reducing the water that's running off and getting to our streams. But I'm really excited to see what this looks like next year. These gardens generally do take a few years to really fill in it and look good. So for most of us that are working on our patients, this is a really great way to kind of remind us that things do take a little bit of time, but it's totally worth it once they start to grow and fill in. And getting close to the end here on 2021. So try to provide workshops and different educational sessions. Again, happy to gear this towards anybody who has an idea or has a topic they want to talk about or learn about. We had a stormwater management session. So Davie Resource Group, they were great. They came in January and February and provided a few quick half-hour sessions talking about stormwater and solutions there. Pretty much all of our work, there's some type of educational component, right? We need to understand why we're doing something before we do it. So for our rain barrel initiative, we had this conservation at home workshop, kind of taking on the phrase at home with this and thinking about, well, what can we do at home to make a difference, or start thinking about protecting our streams from our home, which might be miles from the nearest stream. We had a rain garden workshop. We had a separate rain barrel specific workshop, and then we had a information session about the Oldham Reserve. I'm really passionate about this site, the Oldham Reserve, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But this is currently a public site that it's slated for development. So it's a beautiful piece of land, and we're trying to go in and protect some of it while we can, and hoping to have that be more accessible to the public. We also had a fun little event where we coordinated with the Lagrange library, and it was an event for kids where we focused on this book, Water Protectors, and that is a really awesome book for kids, and the library has a great section on of books for kids if you're looking for any type of nature, environmental focused book or resource there. And talk a little bit about funding and grants. So this program itself is funded through 2 grants right now through the Kentucky Division of Water. So that's how my position is funded and all the work that happens through this program. But we're always trying to bring in some more funding. So we applied for a couple of grants that sadly we did not get, but that's just the nature of applying for grants. So one of the grants we applied for, it was a national grant through the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Foundation. But I did want to just mention these to talk to you, to let you know a little bit about some of the work that we are hoping to do more of. So for this grant, we were looking at trail design at the Oldham Reserve, starting a specific environmental youth group, and then helping the New Springs Park with rain gardens. And then there was a state grant that we applied to create a live stakes nursery, and we did not get that as well. We have 2 grants in the works right now. So another one through the Kentucky Division of Water, they have this non-point source program, which is exactly what we're working on, non-point source pollution. And we applied for that. We should find out later this week if we've been approved to get to the next level of the grant. There's still a couple steps before we get the grant, but hoping to make it past this current level here we're at. And this grant is going to be focused on detention basins. So detention basins, generally they're either bowl shaped, or sometimes they just look like a area of lawn that's got a little bit of an indent to it. And sometimes they are filled with water depending on what they are. But generally most residential areas have these detention basins to help channel stormwater to, because when you clear an area of land to build houses, you need to manage that stormwater. So we're hoping to, in short, do that in a way that's a little better for our streams, and that's what this grant is about. And then I'm also working with the library and some other partners to apply for a grant to plant a pollinator garden at the library. So we're hoping that happens next spring. I'm going to take a breath there and check to see if anybody has any questions.
I've got a question.
Sure.
I love seeing the pollinator gardens along the expressway when I travel. And I was wondering, in the next 3 to 5 year plan for 71, or is it within the scope of what you do to like work with the cabinet, the transportation cabinet, to try and factor that stuff into their design plans for anything that's coming this side of exit 18?
That would be wonderful. So I haven't directly done any work on planting along I-71. The state in the past few years has been doing roadside assessments on state roads and highways, and they're trying to find if there are any really high priority areas for either conserving or planting plots for wildlife. So I have reached out to them to mention, just, hey, we're here and we have an interest in this, and we have we're interested in working together if this is something that you all would like to do in Oldham County. I think they're kind of in the reconnaissance stage of figuring things out, but I would love to see more roadsides planted with pollinator habitat. And I'm hoping, I did reach out to Kentucky, I forget the name now. It's like Kentucky Natural Lands, I believe, who are helping with this project. I'm probably saying the organization incorrectly, to see if maybe next month we could get somebody to come to our group and talk about this, because I only basically know what I've seen on Facebook. So we want to make sure that they know that we're here and interested as well. Thanks.
I have another question.
Yeah.
This morning at 6:30, there was a conservation district meeting that I wasn't able to make. Can you tell who are they, what are they doing, and how do you interface to them? I have no idea what they do.
Oh, okay. So conservation districts, I'll try not to be long-winded here. They're really great organizations. So conservation districts, they came out of, I'm not going to go the whole big history, but they did come out of the Dust Bowl era. So in the 1920s and 30s, when land was severely eroding all over the country, and the government started to pay attention to this as an issue with farmland eroding, the conservation district is basically the local organization to help farmers and growers, landowners protect their land. So they're all about conservation of natural resources, and they work a lot with federal organizations to bring funding to farmers and landowners to help protect their lands. They do have early meetings on Wednesday morning, but I worked with them some here in Oldham County, and I sit on the board in Jefferson County. But I would recommend probably calling them or sending them an email. If you're trying to connect with them, let me know. I can talk to you offline too.
Okay. There's no way I'd go to a 6:30 in the morning meeting without making sure they're going to be there.
Yeah, it's an early time. I think farmers, they get up early, they're ready to go.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, I'd probably try to talk to them a little bit on the side and see if some of what you're trying to do is connecting with them. Okay, I'm looking on Facebook and a question here. So are you working with South Fork Harrods Creek Watershed as well? So my job is specific to Curry's Fork. There has been some work in Harrods Creek that I haven't been involved with, similar to Curry's Fork. There are some watershed plans in Harrods Fork or in Harrods Creek, but there's just not there's not an active group doing anything as far as I know at the moment. But I'd be happy to talk with somebody in Harrods Creek because a lot of the stuff is, is similar. So another question, do you provide presentations to HOA or smaller cities about pollinator groups or ways to help provide site visits? So yes, so connecting with HOAs has been a big challenge here because we don't really have like a concrete list of what HOAs are out there. We don't have contact information for HOA. So if you have an HOA that meets, I would be happy to come and talk to you all. Just let me know. And similar to other groups, just let me know, and I'm happy to connect with anybody. Great. All right, I'm going to move on here. Thank you for the questions. Okay, so 2022, I want to just give kind of a quick recap. We have a lot that we want to do in 2022. So we'll start with a big plan and see where we get with it. But as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we want to keep with the streamside planting. So I'm going to have another tree giveaway in the spring, have some organized and volunteer plantings. The piece that we haven't done yet is this cost share piece. So one of the big reasons that we're also focusing on stream banks and having this be public-led, public involvement is because about 1 in every 7 landowners in Curry's Fork and in Oldham County lives along a stream. So that's not an insignificant amount of people that have streams directly in their backyards. So when we start to, notice issues or hear about issues of localized flooding, of stream erosion, our polluted streams, this is really impactful to a lot of people. It's not just a few people that live down over there. And ultimately trying to convey that this does impact all of us. I think, as I said before, so sediment is the biggest source of pollution in Kentucky. So if our streams are eroding, that soil that gets sloughed off the banks, that ends up directly into the streams, adds to that brown color that I showed. And again, trees are just the most economical way that we can restore our stream banks, because most of our banks are eroding. So while we do want to look at more complicated options of protecting our streams on a large scale, this is really the best shot we have at making a dent. So for that cost share, we do have some funding right now, because sometimes going and planting trees in an area is really just not enough. A lot of our streams have much more severe issues, and invasive species is a really big concern, especially honeysuckle, which honeysuckle is one of the worst plants that we have out there here in Kentucky, and it puts this toxin in the ground that prevents other things from growing. So again, more roots in the ground mean more stable. But if you have a plant like honeysuckle that's basically only allowing for more honeysuckle to grow, you really have no option to protect your stream bank other than right directly there where those honeysuckle roots are. So trying to transition away from the honeysuckle, plant some willows, some dogwoods, and some other native trees usually might involve some more complicated work, like hiring a contractor. So we want to give people the option to hire a contractor, especially with this work that's going to be more physically intensive, more time consuming, making it a little bit easier for some people to want to work with us and improve their streams. Okay. I briefly mentioned this idea of a live stakes nursery. We had applied for a grant that we did not get, but thankfully Division of Water is awesome, and they've given us the okay to go forward with this idea of a live stakes nursery. So again, live stakes are those trees that we cut the branches and we stick them in the ground and we grow whole new trees. And we want to make this more accessible, because one thing I've noticed in this watershed is there's just not a lot of land that's publicly accessible. So that's something that we're working on. So last week, I met with Lagrange, their parks committee, and talked to them about using one of their sites for this live stakes nursery. And they've agreed to this, which is really amazing. So we have this area along L&N Lake. You can see this buffer area here. So we're going to go in and plant some larger trees, because if we started with the small trees, it would just take too long before we can bring people there to cut them. So we're going to start with expanding, just increasing this existing buffer zone, using some bigger trees, and then have some workshops at this space. If you've been involved with the other workshops, we've been meeting along Moody Lane at a site there, and this will give us another site to be able to harvest live stakes. And we're going to put a project sign. And then another piece of this too is trying to engage like the county and the city public works departments as well. So if they're going and they keep mowing a site that's maybe on a hill or a little bit wetter and it's eroding, well, maybe we can say, why keep trying to keep the site as grass if it's not impeding, anybody's line of view or anything like that, line of sight. Maybe we can just go and plant some trees. And this will be a way that we can do that in a more economical and sustainable way. We're also part of a grant we have right now. We're trying to look at those larger full-scale stream restoration projects. So where you go in, you completely regrade the stream, because some sites are just so eroded. They have stream banks that are so degraded that planting trees is really just not going to be enough. And especially in some areas where people's houses are flooding. So a couple of years ago, we had an assessment on some of our high priority areas, and we're going to take that and look at hiring a contractor to help us determine if we can get some larger dollars into the watershed to do this full-scale stream restoration. A big piece of this is landowner involvement. So with some of these projects, you need to have landowners who are willing to put an easement on their property where they're not going to mow it, they're not going to build anything on it. So it gets to be a lot more complicated, and we really need to have people involved who we need to have those lines of communication and people really know what's going on and be interested. So it's a longer process, but it's worth it to explore it. And then talking about pollinators a little bit more. So for the Lagrange Welcome Center Pollinator Garden, just using this to continue to provide education outreach to our volunteers, as well as expand to the community. So we're essentially maintaining this garden, and one of the best things about these gardens is they really don't need a whole lot of maintenance at all, which is really great. So by having a public space that's a pollinator garden, we can bring people to it. We can teach them about pollinators. We can provide resources, plants, maybe seeds and plants to plant a pollinator garden on their own property. And then we get to tell the city, hey, you don't need to spend any more of your man hours working on this site. We'll let you know kind of if we need help, but we've got it, which is really amazing. I mentioned the library pollinator garden, so the same thing. We also have our Spring Parks rain garden. So we applied for a grant to help fund this for the city. We didn't get that, but the city has moved forward with this on their own, which is great. So hoping to provide these opportunities for volunteers to plant and then continue to build up this group to kind of be the protectors and maintainers of these gardens. I mentioned the Udall rain garden, so we've got some funding to get a sign in there, and signage is just so critical when it comes to these projects. We want people to know what they're looking at, what the purpose is, and that kind of feeds into the overall success and sustainability of these projects as well. I mentioned seed swaps, no-mow signs, so that's something that's on my list. I'd love to get no-mow signs for people, especially as more people try to leave areas of their yard unmowed, plant native plants, build habitat for wildlife. The transition is much harder without signs and without that message that, this is the way it's meant to be. And, we didn't mow this on, it's on purpose, because it's not necessarily for it to look pretty. It's to provide food and habitat for wildlife. We're going to be having a lakes and ponds management workshop sometime next summer. So working with the Oldham County Extension and with Crystal Lake, we're going to focus on Crystal Lake, but we're going to encourage any type of water owner. So there's a lot of ponds in the watershed, as well as in Oldham County, as well as outside of Oldham County, that people might own. They might have bought their house and it has a pond on it, which is great, but maybe they've seen that pond change over time and they just don't know exactly if that's okay, if there's something wrong with it, how to manage it. So we're hoping to try to provide resources for that. Public trails. So even though we didn't get funding to do this, this is something we're still pushing for. So again, the Oldham Reserve, it's this 1,000-acre site owned by Oldham County and the city of Lagrange. slated for development, but there's a lot of really important streams through here. We've done plantings in this area, and we're working with a group to try to get some public trails in this site, because again, we just don't have enough areas for the public to get outside and walk, get outside in the woods and walk in the woods and see our streams. Okay, so Salt River Watershed Watch. So this is a statewide organization that we are working. It's a statewide organization, Kentucky Watershed Watch, and I mentioned way back that there's 7 basins in Kentucky. So Salt River Basin is one of those. So we have this organization called Salt River Watershed Watch, where we train volunteers how to sample streams, and then we ask them to go out a few times a year and sample their stream. And that really helps to build up this database and this knowledge and local understanding of what's going on with our streams. Because besides this, besides division of water, there's really nobody who's actively looking at the stream. So the citizen science is so important to identify potential issues in streams that nobody else might see. So we're going to have some funding to encourage people in Curry's Fork to come out and learn how to sample and take on this role as a volunteer stream monitor. And I'll just hit on these rain barrels just one last time. So while funding lasts, now is probably not the best time to install a rain barrel, but come spring when you're ready, reach out to me. I'm sure there'll still be funding left, but if you're a little bit dependent on the funding, just please reach out to me beforehand so I can confirm with you that we've still got funding. But sometime, like March, April, get your rain barrels, install them, and then you can submit to me for reimbursement and get a little bit of financial incentive to install them. Okay, and that is 2022. So does anybody have any questions or anything I can clarify about what I just mentioned? Okay, well, if you think of anything at any point, just please reach out, let me know. And I hope I've conveyed that your participation is really important, and especially with these local groups. My job and my goal is to really provide what you all need to do some work. So don't be shy if this is of interest to you and you've got ideas. Let's figure out how to work on them and how to get things done that are important to you. So with that, thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful holiday, and I will see you in 2022.
Thank you.
Thank you
all.